I want to talk about Hustler and in my dynamics and my ability to crumble under pressure like all the time. It's really annoying. So essentially, I feel really bad about how the Friday stream went. I actually started off really freaking well. So well. And just crumbled for some reason. One way or another, I found a way to fail.
The reason why Rampage's or Ethan's decision table don't make sense, even logical sense to us as poker players, or even just from simple logic perspective, is because the belief about himself that maybe he's not worthy, he's not good enough, he can't win because he doesn't deserve to win, and not just at poker table but in life. Those beliefs are deeply rooted and they have nothing to do with poker, which is why we see decisions at the poker table that are not poker based, because they don't make any logical or reasonable sense.
So we're seeing complete lack of fundamentals and purpose, and we're seeing these unconscious beliefs, baggage, emotions drive decisions at the table. I resonate with what Rampage is going through because in my first 9 years in Vegas, I didn't win a single year. I was a losing player, and what was happening was the beliefs that I held about myself that I didn't even know were there. I didn't know that I believed that about myself. So I was having these unconscious conversations within that were showing up as the results I was having. So the beliefs that I had about myself were creating the results. Me self-sabotaging, me blowing through money, me being a winner at the beginning of the session, trying to hold on so tightly because I needed to prove that I was a winner, and then sabotaging it by playing safe and then ultimately blowing up. Had me having these beliefs, creating the results over 9 years of me just, and the beliefs being that I'm a loser, I'm not deserving of love, I'm not worthy of success, I'm not worthy of feeling good, of feeling joy, gratitude, abundance. And so what happens is because I had those beliefs and I wasn't aware that they were there, my unconscious wants me to know that those beliefs are there. So they will create the experience of those beliefs, which would be results I'm having where I'm proving that I'm a loser.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing you say is your unconscious, which is basically the part of your mind that runs your entire programming. It's the one that circulates blood through your system. It's the one that pumps your heart. Things that we're not aware of. It's just happening in the background. So there is an image or there is a belief that got installed at some point. It could have started when you were little. It could have even happened when you were born. And that belief was entrenched, or you had this image that's just there that became part of your reality. So instead of seeing it as like, oh, there's a thought, it's like, no, this is my reality. I'm a loser. But it was such a real feeling to you that it wasn't even conscious, meaning you weren't aware of it. It just was there. Where this is who I am. So when you lost, you might not have always thought I'm a loser, but you could feel it. Like, oh yeah, I deserve this. Ultimately, that is who I am. Mm-hmm. And no matter how much you fought it, all it did is confirm it over and over. So this is why we bring it up, because we want you to understand that we're not here to pile on Rampage. I know it's very popular across the poker world to basically look at Rampage as a joke. It's like, oh, look at this, YouTuber who somehow won a bunch of tournaments by getting lucky and basically ran up his bankroll by getting super lucky, doesn't have any skill or any talent, and now it's all showing up. So let's all celebrate, or let's look at this burning dumpster fire or this this car wreck and just all watch and gloat about how much we're better or smarter than him. Ultimately, what we realize is that we all have that part in us. It's just some are better dealing with it than others. And the best players are the ones that chose to address it and go inward in order to show up at the table without the beliefs that I need to prove myself every session. I need to confirm that I'm not a loser, or that I'm not worthy. It becomes about just this session, just this hand, and just this street, which allows you to operate at a way higher level than anybody around you. And ultimately, Rampage is capable of that now. However, the biggest step he needs to make is to understand that these beliefs that are driving my actions, I get to acknowledge them, go there, and release it. And this is what our coaching is based on fundamentally. It's on going deeper within in order to release things that aren't working for you, that are in the way of your success at the poker table and in life.
Okay, so first let's take a look at what's happening on the poker table. And let's take a look at a couple of hands that clearly illustrate this battle that's happening with Rampage between who he believes he is deep down and who he wants to be on the surface. So first let's talk about a hand from the Tropicana stream that I played in, where he has Queen Jack in the big blind, and the hand plays out versus him and Kitty Quo.
I have Queen Jack suited here. I'm in the straddle for $200, and I get the button doing a min raise to $400. Not sure why he's min raising, but here we are. He makes it $400, and Kitty in the small blind 3-bets to $2,200. Look, I'm down lots of money at this point. I could certainly just fold this hand because I think Kitty has a good hand a lot of the time here, considering how she plays, but I am a little bit stubborn, and I want to play big pots. So I 4-bet, re-raise it up to $5,000, a very clean, even number.
So you open the button, you get 3-bet by Kitty.
Big.
Yeah, so she 5.5x's you in the small blind, and Rampage wakes up with Queen Jack suited in the big blind and decides that it's time to battle. Why? Once again, because he's trying to do whatever it takes to not feel like a loser, which means I got to fight for it, regardless if this is the situation that calls for it.
Not only fight for it, but make something big happen. Like not just win the pot, but win a massive pot. Like something to literally snap him out of what he's feeling right now.
Yeah, because for him, winning small is, at this point, is almost maybe half a step above losing. Because it doesn't satisfy the emotional thirst of, I need to feel like I'm a winner. I need to feel good about myself. And at this point, because he moved up in stakes so much and so fast, it's almost like a drug habit. Because now there's an addiction to winning huge pots, to making huge plays, to winning all the money back right away. And if that doesn't happen, it feels emotionally hollow and it feels emotionally empty. And it goes back to the feeling of, well, I'm a loser, or I feel like a loser, regardless of if I won a small pot or if I broke even.
Yeah, we can even talk about, poker strategy-wise, pre-flop. He chooses to 4-bet. That could be a flat there. If he really wanted to play a pot in position with Kitty, he could flat there with the Queen Jack and see what happens post-flop. But what we see is this belief that I need to make something happen, I need to play a big pot, is driving him to like, no, let's play a big pot.
Once he bloats the pot, then there's attachment to this pot. There's attachment to, I want to play a big pot and I want to win it. And if I don't, that's going to make me feel even worse than I already feel. So it's all or nothing. The flop comes out 8-9x, which gives Rampage gut shut, and she checks over to him, and he bets small, about quarter pot. But at this point, the stack to pot ratio is huge because she basically has less than, after the call, she would have less than pot size bet behind.
Yeah, pot would be 15,000. Kitty's going to have about 11.
Yeah. So she flats there, and basically the turn's a brick, and he has a simple decision here. Because he obviously could have, if we're talking about poker logic wise, he could have all the overpairs. He could have, I guess, some sets there. And if a hand's like 9-8 suited, they decide to turn to a bluff also. But he decides and he creates this reason to check there, which doesn't make any sense. Because he would have range advantage here to jam the turn, to basically put her to decision. However, he decides to check back, but this is an emotional decision, not a poker one. So here we see the battle within, the internal battle between Rampage and Ethan. Rampage, the tough, strong, courageous, ready to bluff it all off, ready to run you over and make these great decisions. And Ethan, I don't want to make a mistake. I'm scared. I don't want to confirm that I'm a loser, and I want to keep it safe. Comes up. And here, Ethan makes the decision for him because he decides to go safe.
So we're going to head to the turn, which is the 6 of clubs. Very dicey card, I think. I mean, it doesn't really change a whole lot, but I do think my opponent isn't going to have many hands that will fold here once she calls the flop bet. So when she checks it over to me here, I think I am going to check this back.
I don't know what hand she could have that would call flop that's now going to fold turn.
Yeah, which is using logic or trying to use logic to confirm emotional decision. The emotional decision is, I don't want to bet here and get snapped off.
She almost, would you say she doesn't have a flop folding range?
Yeah.
She has more of a turn folding range than a flop folding range.
Yeah, she's going to float there a bunch of times, especially to a tiny bet from him, because she's expecting a small C bet. So, I mean, unless she completely whiffed and doesn't have any even backdoor scenarios, she's going to flat there just to float. And then on the river, a card coming in that triggers his desire to win a huge pot, which he was battling with from the get-go. And it confirms, like, yes, this is what I have to go for. And I got a jam here to win this pot. And so we see it as an example of where he plays it with through either Ethan or Rampage, he'd actually either lose less money or win the pot. Because let's say if he played through this, I want to play it safe side of him, he would have folded pre-flop. And then he loses nothing outside of his big blind. Yeah,
folded pre, or even if he went the other route where he flatted pre and flatted the flop because he had a gut shot, then Kitty's giving up. And if he breathed on it on the turn, then he's winning.
Yeah. Or the other side, which is Rampage, which is I'm going to be aggressive every street. He would have done with the pre-flop, then he would have bet the flop, jam turn, and won the pot.
Yeah.
But because he's in that in-between war within, between playing it safe and not wanting to feel like a loser and I need to prove myself, I have to fight for it in order to prove myself, it's a constant war within. Which creates a scenario where he sabotages himself and loses the most amount possible in the hand.
Yep.
Cool. You win.
Oh, wow. She makes the call. That was our GG moment, folks.
So notice when you are actually stuck in your own head having conversation within without realizing that's what's going on, and how often the outcome of that or lack of awareness that the conversation is actually internal, and in this moment you have no connection to the opponent, why opponent is in the hand, what the opponent is doing, what they're trying to accomplish. But the only thing that's happening is your own projection or outwardly projection of how you feel. So if you feel like you want to play it safe, it's not that the player is doing something to make you feel like, oh, I have to play it safe, but it's unacknowledged feelings or thoughts that I need to play safe right now.
And using the board or the cards that come out to confirm that. So like Rampage saying on the turn, okay, I think this is a bad card for me to barrel, which is just he's using the card to confirm the story within, like I need to give up here.
Yeah, and then when you ramp up aggression, it's not coming from a place of, oh, opponent did something. Most likely it's coming from a place of, well, this card is triggering this desire in me to fight because I could represent this card. This is something that's in my range, which is ultimately logical explanation for an emotional impulse. And how often you make decisions based on you justifying an emotional impulse without looking within to seeing, well, where's that impulse coming from? Where's that desire in that moment coming from? Is it actually poker based, or is it something based on unconscious or unacknowledged desire from within? Rampage is in the straddle, and Stevens opens, who's a really solid tight player and has that reputation for a long time. And Rampage has ace-jack, and he 3-bets him, which is pretty standard here because he's basically dealing with one person showing aggression late. So his hand is way ahead of the other person's range here. So far, so good.
And where was Rampage emotionally in all this?
The confidence is quite low today, to be honest, but I'm at a very familiar place that we've played poker before. So I'm nervous, I'm ready to battle, and trying to have a good time.
Well, he's coming into the session, he's in this state of, I'm on a big downswing. I need to do something to change that. And that means he's in the Rampage mode, which is, I need to play the biggest pot possible in order to get it back right away.
Yeah, and so what we're going to see in this hand is it's not satisfactory to him to just win a pot. It's got to be, I need to win a ginormous pot.
So in his hand, he 3-bets out of the straddle with ace jack, and the flop is king 10-9 with 2 diamonds. So it's flush drawn board, and he has a jack of diamonds. A standard c-bet, he c-bets close to half pot, which is interesting because in his mind he thought of it as a big bet, which is interesting interpretation, because it doesn't have to be a big bet at all, because that board looks like exactly kind of board that where you should hit it really hard if you're 3-better pre-flop. He gets called. The turn is a blank, and we see once again that there's that pull and push tug of war within, where now Ethan, the scared part, the part that I need to play it safe, I don't want to make a mistake, I don't want to do something wrong, and he shifts to, I can't bet here. When reality is, this is a perfect board from a logical poker perspective to double barrel on, because he has that entire board, and it gives him opportunity to triple if need be, because ultimately Stevens cannot have hands here that should call him down, because all 2 pair hands would be raising.
4 sets, yeah.
And otherwise, if he's calling, he should not have a hand to call off with.
Yeah.
But instead, he shuts down here on the turn and says, well, I have ace high, so maybe I have showdown value to win.
Complete brick on the board. A little bit scary that my opponent called such a big bet. So when he checks it over to me here, I decided to check this one back. Sitting with ace high, maybe could be ahead. Certainly could bluff on the turn, but I decided to think that my hand's good enough to see a free river card.
And so he creates a logical reason for pumping breaks, even though it doesn't make poker sense. So that tells us there's this huge gap between I need to play it safe at all costs to I want to win a pot as big of a pot as possible. And we see it going pull and push in the same hand again. So he just checks back, and the river is a queen of diamonds. So it brings in front door flush, and it gives Ethan nut straight.
Gives Rampage the nut straight.
Oh yeah, give Rampage nut straight. Yeah, well, exactly. Because Rampage is the one that ends up playing out the rest of his hand. And here's the interesting part, right? Because it seems in this scenario, the only decision there is between calling or folding. Because we know that Stevens leading almost pot here is pretty polarizing. He's not doing it with the hands for value that you could beat with a nut straight there. However, for Rampage, who's the one that takes over the wheel, because the previous street was Ethan, the one that played it safe and wanted to keep the pot as small as possible without being aggressive, now it becomes all about, well, I rivered a hand, and now what is my purpose at the table, which is to play pots as big as possible to try to win as much as I can in a single hand.
Yeah, so I could win right here by calling. I could have the best hand, I have a straight, but it would not be satisfying.
Yeah, it would emotionally be disappointing.
Underwhelming.
Yeah. So even though logically it makes no sense to raise there, because we know based on the type of player he's up against, he just doesn't have hands that really calling off any raise that Rampage could beat. However, for Rampage in that moment, the emotional part that he's chasing, the emotional high, is I need to win the biggest pot possible. And if that means risking another 100,000 to try to win 250K pot is more important than me just winning a $50,000 pot or $60,000 pot.
Yeah, and talk about how he misinterpreted the stack size.
And from my perspective, he only has two 25K chips. So I thought he only had about $60,000 behind in his stack. And with that number in my head, I thought I could be all in. Well, I guess I'm wrong, because I decided to shove, which I thought was not a very big shove at that, maybe $60,000 to $70,000 back. But turns out when Brandon is thinking for a long time, and it's not a good spot here because you can see he has a flush, he ends up grabbing his chips, plays with them, and I see he has three 25K chips. That was news to me.
Yeah, so this is important. So our thinking mind, our conscious mind, which is what we think with, what we make logical decisions with, how we interpret the world around us in the moment, it has a very limited capacity to interpret information in the moment. So our thinking mind constantly deletes, distorts, and generalizes information. And it shows up in life when, let's say, you talk to somebody and you tell them something and they tell you something back, but it's very different from what you just said. And I'm sure it happens to you all the time. And that's an example of information being distorted. And information being deleted is the example right here, where he literally has the stack of opponent right in front of him and he's deleting the chips that he's seeing and instead sees it as one 25K chip instead of the guy having two 25K chips and a bunch of other chips behind him.
He had 3 and Rampage thought he had 2.
Yeah. And not only that, he had a bunch of other chips that he didn't count for. So in Rampage's mind, because it sees what it wants to see, right? We talked about he needs to win this huge pot because that's the emotional driver. So that instantly deletes and distorts information, where now he sees, instead of seeing what it actually is, which is 120,000 or 100,000 behind, he sees it as 40,000 behind. So then it creates confirmation of this desire, emotional belief of, I get to go in here and maybe he'll call me with a hand that I could beat. And if I'm wrong, it's okay because it's only 40,000 more. But that decision was driven, and even him misinterpreting his stack was driven by his unconscious desire to win the biggest pot possible, even if that means risking much more to lose it, even if it gives him a tiny % chance to win it, the big pot. So this unconscious belief is ultimately driving his reaction, what he sees, what he perceives, and ultimately his final decision, which is to go all in there in a way that's never going to succeed, because he's always getting folded. The opponent's always folding out worse hands and only calling with the better hands.
Yeah. And this is not high level stuff. This is not a high level concept. This is like a pretty basic concept. So it just shows how strong the emotions and the beliefs can be in driving our decisions. It just totally overrides logic in the moment, even the simplest spots. What is the payoff in all of this for Rampage, for Ethan? We actually see each of them have a different payoff. So the payoff is anytime that we're running a pattern or a program, or anytime we're creating an unconscious cycle where the belief creates a thought, creates a behavior and an action, and then that action is rewarded with a payoff, and that keeps the cycle flowing. So in order to keep that cycle flowing, there is a payoff that you get in order to reward you and to keep that cycle going. Common examples of payoffs would be attention, sympathy, they're emotional payoffs.
Yeah, poker payoffs. Here's a common example of a poker payoff. It's Daniel Negreanu making calls on a river when he correctly announces the opponent's hand and still makes the call.
All right, I'm all in.
Call.
You got a full house? Quads? That's good too.
He called my hand. I was like, what is quads?
All right, I can't win then. If you got quads, I can't win.
People always wonder, like, well, if you know the hand, then why do you keep calling? Because the payoff for him is more important at that moment than actually making the right decision. And what's the payoff there is to feel emotionally validated for being able to see and know what the opponent has. So then even if he's wrong, he still gets validated by saying, see, I knew it, I told you, and I knew exactly what he had. So he gets to be right, feel emotionally validated, and get the confirmation of, I feel good about myself. Poker payoff could also be if you believe deeply inside that, you know, you're not worthy of success, or you're not worthy of abundance, prosperity, or making money, you're going to create decisions. You're going to make decisions to confirm that belief. Even though it sounds illogical, why would you do something that hurts you? But if that's your belief, then you're unconscious, meaning you, on a deeper level, unknowingly think that it's true. So it needs to be confirmed because that's your identity. And your identity needs to confirm itself in order for you to feel validated, in order for you to feel like yourself. And then the other payoffs that come with it is you get to be a victim, because then you get to say, oh, I got set up, I got cooler, I got unlucky, or how come this always happens to me? And you also get to be right. And you get to be right about being a loser.
Gosh. I have a video of me calling you and you saying good call, picking up your bag and storming out of here. And I like that video. Wow.
video.
like that video. Another video of me saying, all right, nicely played, and me going home, loser again. I hate that video. All right, this is what we're going to do. I'm going to fold this, but quickly throw that hand in the mud.
show it,
I don't
Eric.
want to see it.
Whoa.
I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. Oh!
Yeah, so for me personally, when I spoke earlier about my results over the first 9 years of being in Vegas, I had to eventually come to the point where I was sick of running this pattern of showing up to the table to lose, to feel shitty about myself, to beat up on myself, to that whole cycle. I had to get eventually sick of it. I got to emotional rock bottom. Actually, probably what really happened is my kids saved me. That my baby mama got pregnant, and I couldn't show up at the poker table anymore to satisfy the emotional conversation. I was like, oh shit, there are now people that I love and care for that I'm responsible for, and I now get to shift myself and really look within to create what I want to in life, because it's not just about me anymore. I can't just satisfy this emotional conversation. And that's just a process of acknowledging it and becoming conscious of it, which means looking in the mirror and saying, how is what I'm seeing, or how is realizing that we are the creator of our reality. So what we see is something that we've created. And so consciously we know I created this somehow. So what is within me that created this? And sometimes it's I created something good, or sometimes it's I created something bad. But ultimately, if we don't turn the mirror around and look within and see I created this somehow, then we're living in the state of victim, which is this shit is happening out here and I'm getting unlucky. I'm getting cooler. I'm the unluckiest poker player in the world. The world is out to get me. And you'll see a escaping the responsibility of what's happening within. We asked at the beginning, will Rampage get out of this? And so what that comes down to is the payoff. And so what we see right now, we saw him on Nick Fertucci's podcast talking about nothing's going to change. This is who I am. Even when I played 1-3, it was constantly I am living a thin line between life and death at the table of all times. I have half my net worth or my net worth on the table, and I'm living this emotional roller coaster ride. And, I started with nothing. I'm going to end with nothing. And that's just what it is. That's just who I am, and nothing's going to change. So, and what we see is because he's getting a payoff for running this pattern.
Can Rampage become a winner? Absolutely. He could become a huge winner. In fact, Mariano would be a good example of a YouTube poker player who came in around the same time and who is a big time winner playing the biggest games, while Rampage is not. And the difference isn't that Mariano is a genius and Rampage is an idiot. The difference is emotional intelligence. It's ability to recognize your own patterns, what drives you, and to be able to correct it in the moment and correct in between sessions to create reality that you want. Mariano is able to do that and is obviously understands what's going on internally to be able to show up in a way that supports who he is and his higher purpose, which your higher purpose is something that goes beyond making money in poker, and it's your driver towards whatever it is that you actually envision for yourself as your ultimate goal. Meanwhile, Rampage, because he's stuck in that conversation, is unable to see past his own conversation of I'm not worthy, I'm not good enough, ultimately I'm a loser, or I'm somebody who's just never going to win or deserves success continuously.